Hey guys, this is John, and I'm playing Alex2015 in the 15-minute pool on ICC. Can't recall playing this player before. While he is making his first move, I will check his stats. He is 3-0 in his 15-minute games. He has a 5-minute rating of 2304. Let's just check his history as long as he's not moving. Yeah, looks like a pretty decent player, just judging by his 5-minute games. I don't see any 15-minute games in his history. So he opens with d4. Let's play knight f6. And I'll make up my mind what to do after c4. I don't have any particular opening in mind that I'd like to play. Maybe I'll play e6. But he plays c3. A pretty passive move. So we have a lot of things we can do against c3. I tend to think d5 is a good move right here. And it could lead to a fairly symmetric position. But as black, we should be happy with a sedate position if it arises, especially out of d4, because d4 is one of the safest moves on move 1, and it's very hard to force the issue against that move. And if white wants to play a system type opening like this, you kind of have to let them. So I just developed my bishop outside the chain. He's playing queen b3, attacking the b7 pawn. I could play b6 here, but queen c8 is probably a little more coherent. It avoids any unnecessary pawn weaknesses, so let's prefer that move. He plays bishop g5. So against this, he's threatening to take on f6 and then take on d5 thereafter. I could play e6 or I could play knight bd7. If e6, he might take on f6. That would lead to an interesting position. It would be unbalanced. He's wrecking my king side, but I would retain the bishop pair. Knight bd7 is sensible. That's the safer move. So that if he takes on f6, I can replace it with my other knight. The only thing I don't like about that is if I want to play c5 later, my knight might be better off on c6. But I think I will play this because I think it's definitely flexible enough. And c5, if I do want to play it, will be propped up by my knight and my queen. I just won't have as much pressure on d4, and I'm okay with that. e3. I think it might be good to throw in h6 right now. Yeah, let's do that. This gives our bishop a retreat square to h7 in the event that he plays knight h4. So I'm just gaining a tempo on his bishop and trying to make a useful move. I would not expect him to take. I would expect bishop h4, bishop f4, but he does take. Maybe he'll jump his knight into e5? Hard to say. My plan is very simple, just e6 and develop my dark square bishop to e7 or d6, and then castle short. And get fully coordinated. Plays c4, all right. Unusual to play c3 and then c4 thereafter. e6 is the first move that comes to mind. What he's trying to do is he's trying to develop his knight to c3 with this move. He's delayed the development of his queenside knight until now, and now that he's played c4, it can fit in on c3. So I would anticipate something like c3, knight c, or e6 rather, knight c3, and then e6, reinforcing the center. Maybe rook c1. I think I could just play bishop e7 or bishop d6 then. Maybe bishop d6. Yeah, let's do this. I thought for a second about bishop takes b1, but his knight coming to c3 is not a big enough deal to have to worry about trading my light square bishop for his knight. I think knight c3, c6, rook c1, bishop d6 is fully playable for black. So he develops the knight through d2 after all. I'll probably still play c6. I bet he's trying to go for bishop d3 now. If his knight had gone to c3, he would not have the luxury of playing bishop d3 because his queen wouldn't be observing the d3 square. Okay, let's just play c6 anyways. So on bishop d3, I can trade, or maybe I can play knight e4. Probably trading is more reliable. Yeah, definitely so. Knight e4, I would worry that after a move like bishop takes e4, I would end up with a pawn on e4 that might be hard to defend. Unfortunately, because I played h6, I can't play bishop g6 in this position, so I'm pretty much obligated to trade. I don't really want to let him take on f5 and double my f-pawns, so the trade is going to happen. I think I could trade and then play bishop b4, and the position is going to be very close to equal. Let's say he castles. I take on d2. He takes with his knight. I castle. Yeah, there's not really much for either side in that position. It's too bad to have to go down to such a bland middle game, but there will still be plenty of pieces on the board for us. It's just that a lot of the minor pieces are getting exchanged, so it's going to inch closer to an endgame much quicker than usual. Not sure why he's thinking there's nothing to think about. Yeah, and I like bishop b4. I mean, I could also keep my bishop back, like bishop e7 or bishop d6. But he's going to play e4, and I don't want to end up in a position where my bishop is ineffective. I think the best role for my bishop right now is just to exchange itself for one of his knights, which slows down his e4 plan too, by the way. That's a major reason for this move. He castles, I'll take. Fully expecting knight takes. If I delayed the capture on d2 for a move, like say I had castled instead in response to him castling, he might have been able to move that knight, like maybe knight b3, and I guess I didn't have to be like terrified about that move, but it could be annoying to deal with. So he takes with the queen, giving me the option of taking on c4. But if I do that, my pawn on c4 will be vulnerable. Maybe he can go queen b4 and prevent me from castling at the same time. So it's not much of a risk he's taking, because if I take that pawn, he'll have plenty of compensation, or he'll just win the pawn back with advantage. So let's just castle. If he captures, hard to say which way I'll take back, actually. I think both recaptures would be acceptable. I would probably slightly lean towards e takes, because I could easily maneuver my knight into the d6 square then, which would be an optimal square in the Queen's Gambit decline-like structure that we would have. So he plays rook c1. I think knight e4 is a good move. He might have his eye on playing knight e5 himself. Queen c7 is also good here. Maybe queen c7 to start. Yeah, let's do that. Just to coordinate our rooks before deciding to play knight e4. Very likely I will play knight e4, but I'm just trying to retain some flexibility. And if knight e5, I can think about playing knight d7 if I want to trade the knights. He could follow with f4 then, with perhaps a small initiative, so we'll see if that's worth playing. The pawn being on h6 versus h7 does have some implications. Like if his knight comes to e5 and this knight is not on f6 and I'm in a position to play f6, I would be more hesitant to play that now because the g6 square is so weak. So knight e4 is possible. A rook move like rook a d8 looks very normal right now. I think knight e4. And if knight e5, I'll definitely consider f6 to kick it away. With the knight having the option of coming back to d6, I can look forward to relieving the tension between the two pawns in the near future. White looks very slightly better in this position. Hardly anything. I mean, the position's nearly symmetric. He just has a little bit more space with his pawn on c4 and mine on c6, taking up a more defensive posture. It's very, very close to equal, though. Rook a d8 seems good right now. I think I'll wait on f6. I don't necessarily want to play that right away. Yeah, let's just play a solid move. And if he takes on d5, I take with my e-pawn, and he goes b4, I think knight d6 should slow down any attempt to play b5. I'll keep the f6 move for later. Okay, so rook fd1. Looks like he's content not to do too much in the position right now. Maybe rook fe8. Yeah, this is fine. Rook fe8 is helpful if I play f6 soon, because after knight g6, I wouldn't have to lose a tempo moving my rook. Knight to d3, so maneuvering once again. One thing I was considering is moving my queen, like queen e7, because I feel like it's no longer needed on the c file, nor was it ever really needed on the c file. That was just the most convenient way to connect my rooks. And given the x-ray situation that he has with his queen and his rook on the c file, I think it's better to just get this out of the way. I'm curious what he'll do as far as the tension with the c and the d pawns. And also if he's going to prepare some sort of queenside initiative. The last few moves have just been bringing our pieces to the center and a little bit of shadow boxing. Yeah, b3, he continues waiting a little bit. Not a bad strategy. Maybe h5 would be interesting. If I could go h5, h4. It's a little out there, though. I don't have to do that right away. There's lots of other moves I can make in this position. He's controlling my e5 and c5 potential pawn breaks with his knight on d3. I could invade with my queen, queen a3 maybe. Doesn't do anything, it's just an empty threat. I can play knight d6. Also doesn't do a whole lot. I could play queen g5. Start looking at his king side. I think I'll play queen a3. It looks annoying. It stops him from playing a4 too. My queen's not in danger of being trapped, so this move looks fine to me. He could maybe play b4, but I'm somehow not worried. If b4, knight d6 could be played and I'm attacking c4. I think now the most important thing will be to make quick, solid decisions with this amount of time on our clock and not let him get too far ahead, just playing slow moves. Because he's really not doing much of anything right now. So I don't have to go into the tank and spend a lot of time trying to tilt against windmills, let's say. I mean, I might even go back with my queen to e7 in the very near future. Just ask him what he plans to do. Because when the onus is on you, you're going to be burning time. When you feel like you're the one who has to come up with something in the position, you're usually the one to start burning that clock time. Okay, so he finally plays c5. Probably with an eye towards playing b4 soon. Wonder if I should go f6 now. f6, b4, e5. And open up the center. I think I can leave my queen on a3. Even though b4 is on the horizon. Because he needs his knight on d3 to defend. So this looks all right. What if he goes f6, h4? F3 is not a threat. I can always come to g3. Okay, let's do this. I'm not going to wait around once he plays c5 and shows that he might start marching on the queen side. I'm not going to wait around for him to do that. I want to prepare counterplay myself, and it's probably going to happen in the center. He could go f4 now in a bid to stop me from playing e5. In that case, I might withdraw my queen. I might go queen a5 and try to come back through c7. I'd have to figure out what to do about that knight situation, because that could slow me down. f4 solidifies our knight on a gorgeous square, but could take a while before I'm able to do anything. Okay, so he plays the move I alluded to. It's trying to surround my knight, basically. He has in mind f3, but I saw that I could always escape through this square. So if I play e5, he goes f3, knight g3. That looks fine for me. Yeah, I think this is okay. I mean, maybe he could play king h2 to guard the g3 square. It just seems kind of improbable. Like one line I see is king h2, I take d4. If he were to play f3, then I have knight c3. So let's say he just recaptures instead, and then I go queen a5. If f3, I can check on c7, and I'll have my queen and knight both attacking the g3 square. Let's pre-move this. If he trades, I get the retreat to f6 as a possibility. Okay, so he plays f3. Taking is nothing, so let's do this as planned. Again, I'll pre-move this. I don't mind seeing him push these pawns, even though my knight is kind of getting kicked around. He's creating weaknesses. The h-pawn is weak, e3 is weak. If my knight comes to f5, I have a good chance of targeting both of them. Okay, queen f2. Is he going to go g4? That must be his plan. Yeah, I missed that sequence. So if I move my knight, like knight f5, I think he's planning on g4. And if my knight comes back to e7, he can take on e5. I'm losing a pawn. That's mildly annoying. I could play e4 right now. He takes on g3, I take d3, and he wouldn't be able to take it yet. Rook takes d3 because this rook is hanging. Looks kind of artificial, though. He could play queen f2. I could play rook e7. I don't know. Do I like that better than knight f5? Knight f5, g4. I could play e4 then. You could just take it, though. So e4, queen takes g3, take d3. Queen f2, let's say. Rook e7. Let's say rook e1. Rook d, e2. Or e8, I mean. And then rook cd1. Don't know if I quite am able to stop him from playing rook takes d3. I don't think so. Okay, my time is getting a little low now. I'm going to try it. What if he... I'm also looking at what if he just moves his knight? Like e4, knight e1. That might not be good. e4, knight e1. If knight f5, he can take on e4. That's very annoying. Okay, we're going to do this. If g4, I'm probably just playing knight e7, and he takes, and maybe rook f8. That was my backup plan. I'm not ecstatic about that, though, by any means. Yeah, g4, knight e7. I'll look at g4, e4 for a second, too. g4, e4. He takes f5, I take there. Problem is g4, e4, he can play fe. I take with my d pawn, and then maybe queen takes f5 just straight away. He's going up a pawn in that case too. So probably after g4, knight e7, I have better chances than g4, e4. So let's do that. Maybe taking on e5, and if I play rook f8, he can play e6, perhaps. e6 could be problematic. So if do I want to take and then allow knight takes? Might have to. Let's do that. At least we get the f file to work with. What about knight takes and then knight f5? Does that have any worth? You could always play f4. That's not so good. Okay, let's just play rook f8. I don't have sufficient compensation, I'll tell you that right now. But maybe I can drum something up in the impending time pressure situation. He can play f4 and prop up his knight. I might be hard-pressed to get his knight out of there. I think I would love a knight trade right now. d4. d4, pawn takes, knight d5. Is that worth anything? d4, he also has knight c4. I guess I can take on c5 then. This looks interesting. I need a way to try to change the tide, because if I wait, I'm just going to lose slowly. He can play e4 and bypass me now. Yep, I have a hard time doing much right now. Queen b4, he has rook c4. g5 is too radical. I'm going to get smushed if I do that. Okay, let's just play d3. I'm hoping that he takes it, but he's not going to. If he takes it, like with the knight, I have rook takes d3, and his rook on c1 is going to hang. f5, okay. Yeah, queen b4. He has rook c4 again. This position is not looking good for us. I can barely move. Yeah, there's nothing to be done, hardly. I'm just going to resign. I honestly don't have a good move here. Okay, so I lost 3 points in that game. Let's have a look. It was a pretty quiet position, and then all of a sudden, when I thought it was safe to play the f6 and e5 pawn break, it turned out not to be. So, pretty unambitious opening choice from white. c3 on move 2. And I was able to develop cleanly. So I got my queen to c8, protecting b7. I could play b6 like I was saying, but I think it's better to hold off on creating any weaknesses. So queen c8 is flexible. Bishop g5, knight bd7, e3. I think h6 is fine. I could also just play e6. I was mildly afraid he might do this. Just trying to hunt down my bishop pair. There are some long-term implications about the h6 move, though. This actually reminds me of another line in the Slav that Magnus Carlsen and some other top players are fond of, where you actually try to provoke black into playing h6 early on. Maybe I'll show that, or I'll post it in the comments or something. But after h6, I took, he played c4. Engine liked c4. I thought for sure he was going to put the knight on c3. But instead he played just knight bd2. And I reinforced with c6, bishop d3. Yeah, so if my pawn were back on h7, I could play bishop g6 potentially in this position. And if he were to trade, I could take with the h-pawn, and I would have some counterplay down the h-file. It's a nice side benefit of that. But instead, we just swapped the bishops. And I do think bishop b4 is correct. The engine agrees. So just trying to swap my dark square bishop for his knight. Maybe that was hurried. It's possible I'm giving something away. I'm making a small concession by playing bishop takes d2, and that castles is better. I mean, it crossed my mind that if I castle, like maybe he can move this knight, and then my bishop is kind of floating out here. But the knight is not well placed on b3, so I could just drop my bishop back. That's fine. So I took, he took with a queen. It's probably a good idea because, like I said, if I take, I assume he's going to get pretty good counterplay. I wasn't thrilled about playing b5 when I'm not able to castle. I see there's other moves too, like knight e5 or rook fc1. So castle, plays rook ac1. I went queen c7. I think queen c7 is a little bit better than knight e4. I just wanted to keep some flexibility. Like, for instance, if knight e5, like I might have this option. I know he can support it with f4, but it's nice to keep open the option of knight d7 for another move. Queen here. Now I jumped into e4. Yeah, it's hard to predict what he was going to do because the position is pretty sedate. I mean, he has this small space advantage, but that's about it. So queen c2, just preparing rook fd1 maybe. Also getting out of the way of knight e4. It's almost like a prophylactic move. So I played knight e4. He jumped into e5. I played rook ad8. I think this move is fine. Rook fe8, engine approved. Plays his knight back to d3. And I went queen e7. I did feel like a queen move was the correct thing to do here. The engine is suggesting knight f6, which doesn't really make much sense to me. The only advantage I can see about knight f6 is that I might be able to play the knight back to d7 to dispute these squares that his knight is controlling. It's the only reason I would think of to play that. Otherwise, knight d6 seems like a more enticing prospect. So queen e7. He played b3. And then I did bring the queen into a3. Yeah, we both played a lot of moves that the engine likes. I mean, I feel weird about playing queen a3 in some regard because there's no real plan associated with this other than making a good waiting move, stopping him from playing a4 and expanding. But I think that's enough in this position. I mean, you're not going to formulate some grand plan if you're black right here, because any plan you formulate is likely to create weaknesses. And that ultimately is what led to my downfall with f6 and e5. So queen a3, he went c5. I played f6. Yeah, and now things got interesting when he went h4. That seems to be a strong move. I saw that move, but I guess I underestimated it. I just saw that if the coming f3 move is played, that I'd be able to escape through g3. But as it turned out, that was a bad assumption for me that that would be safe, completely safe. And now he is kind of threatening f3 anyways. f3, knight g3. I guess it's not as bad. Queen f2, knight f5, g4. Yeah, I wouldn't have anything hanging. So maybe I should play a move like queen a5. It's hard, though. When you play f6 and your opponent responds with a move that you saw and you think you have a defense against, you're going to continue with your plan. And that's why I played e5. So e5, he played f3. I brought the knight into g3. Yeah, and queen f3, f2. And I thought about e4, but you know, I was looking at a couple different lines. This, and then queen f2, defending e3 and also a2. And slowly white can try to win this pawn. My best move is rook a8. That's kind of funny. The other line I thought about, which ultimately made me reject e4, is what if he just moves the knight? So in addition to knight f4, like the engine suggesting, like I thought just knight e1 also might make sense. Having in mind knight f5 and then capturing on e4, discovered attack on the knight. Knight f5, he played g4. Computer thinks the best chance I have is to take on d4 and then try to grab two pawns. Not fun, though. He's got the e pawn blockaded, and the d pawn coming up is not going to help too much. This has got to be lost for black. It's kind of amazing, but that one move, e5, that might have been all it took. Already white's +1 after this. Queen f2. g4. Yep. g4. Knight back. D takes. So I should try knight g6, even though it shatters my pawns, huh? Even though I end up with f and h pawns. At least my knight has some degree of activity, unlike the game where it was completely dominated by his knight. I took. He took. Yeah, we're getting into desperation territory now. Moves like h5. It's just hard for me to coordinate my pieces. Rook f8. He played f4. Yeah, and d4 was pure desperation, but then he very quickly played e4. I think that's a good reply. Because I was hoping he'd take with a pawn so I could get knight d5 in. It's not much, but at least my knight occupies a good square and I'm threatening the f4 pawn. But e4 just shuts down all of my play. I played d3, just a trick, basically. I mean, if he takes with his knight, I get to take here, and his rook is overloaded. He was defending the knight and also trying to defend c1. That's just a pure trick, though. And he quickly played f5. And I resigned because I couldn't find anything, and I had, at the time that I resigned, about 30 seconds left. So, okay. Yeah, just a very tough game. I mean, the one mistake really did me in. He played basically a perfect game. Again, like, I'm in a situation, having played this game, where, like, I'm pretty suspicious of, like, how well he played, but I don't want to call him out because I just don't have enough evidence. I mean, he might just have played, like, a really good game. I mean, this looked like a really strong game from the white side to me. I basically made one mistake. It was e5, and he was all over me. He had a fair amount of engine matches. I'll be curious what other people think, but like basically starting with h4, like every move was practically the best move. I don't know that there were too many non-engine matches. Granted, there were some forcing moves, right? Maybe here, it all depends on the engine, but like the Stockfish wants to play h5. He played, what, f4, which also seems strong. Is it as strong as h5? I don't know. So, I don't know. Guess it remains to be seen. Keep an eye on him. But I don't want to give the impression that anytime I lose on this channel that I'm chalking it up to a cheater. But this guy's untitled. Like, the account is like very new. Like, I'll just show you guys. He's won all of his standard games. This 5-minute rating is and record is very normal, I'd say. So he might just be a good player who happens to be untitled. But okay, well, hope you guys enjoyed this game, and I'll be back tomorrow with another standard game. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.